afternoon everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Miss P Presents with me, Miss P. Now, over the next 10 weeks, I'm going to be taking you through Miss P's top 10 novels of each decade for a century. So, of course, this week we're going to be starting with the 1920s. So, without further ado, let's get talking. I would just like to say before I begin that some of these novels contain sentiments and ideas that I consider to be highly offensive, and that even though I am recommending the novels, I am not in any way condoning some of the language and the feelings that are expressed in them. So, first up on the list is Gentlemen Prefer Blondes by Anita Loos, published in 1925, which, according to my list, seemed to be a pretty good year for publishing. This is genuinely one of the most laugh-out-loud funny books I've ever read. It is a novella, written in diary form, told from the point of view of the glamorous Lorelei Lee. Lorelei is accompanied by her best friend Dorothy, who she often seems to despise, as they travel across Europe, causing havoc, meeting men, and making judgments about them. Lorelei often doesn't understand who she's with, what their names are, or what's going on at all, which contributes significantly to the humour of the novel. Sometimes she has a good time, sometimes she doesn't. Such is life, and Lorelei never attempts to dress something up when she feels that it's undeserving. Her frequent spelling mistakes are another source of guilty joy. The Eiffel Tower is spelt E-Y-E full, and she also refers to Robert, a Frenchman she meets, as Robber, as in R-O-B-B-E-R.
You must think I was born yesterday.
Well, sometimes there's just no other possible explanation.
It's worth mentioning that to really enjoy this novel, it's better not to think too deeply about it, as the reality of Lorelei's existence has some sinister undertones. But that aside, for me it is a truly great novel and a roaring good laugh. Next up on the list we have Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf, also published in 1925. It tells the story of one day in the lives of a group of high society people in post-World War I Britain. Its central character is Clarissa Dalloway, introduced to us as a society hostess preoccupied with last-minute details for her evening party. It begins with the immortal line, "Mrs. Dalloway said she would buy the flowers herself." As the novel progresses, however, we understand that beneath the surface, Clarissa is haunted by faraway remembrances and is undergoing a crisis of identity, as are many of her peers. It's a novel of beautiful simplicity and directness of language. Woolf is really good at creating a sense of unease and tension. She makes it really easy for us to relate to Mrs. Dalloway. The feeling of having to rally when we least feel capable of doing so is really powerful. We understand how stifling the expectations of others can be. This expectation that things must always carry on. The party must go on, even when we are suffering inner turmoil and distress. The imperativeness of having to keep all of that hidden is really, really moving. In the novel, the human existence is characterised by disappointment, dissatisfaction, and a sense of unassuaged longing. It's also a novel about a society hostess, so it's very close to my heart. So, next up on the list we have Greenery Street by Dennis McHale, also published in 1925. Greenery Street is the delightful story of newlyweds Ian and Felicity in their first year of marriage. It's a very gentle read. Think cups of tea, lawn tennis, and a very well-arranged nightstand. It's sweet, it's charming, and it's amusing. Something that did strike me about reading Greenery Street was how rare it seems to read a novel that is about a happy marriage. for that is pretty much the only thing that it's about. But it's quietly comforting, and it's really engaging to read about the honeymoon period of a couple's life in the year 1924. Those were the days. Joffrey, not now. Not now, later. Not for this one. Can you... Joffrey, I know, but when you take matters into your own hands, things go wrong, don't they? Remember what we said? Yes, you can go now. Next up on the list, we have The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald, published in, you guessed it people, 1925. It's a magical, dreamlike novel. Fitzgerald creates a world in which we become totally immersed. It's a very visceral novel. It's something that you really feel. You can taste the bubbles in the champagne. You can feel the warmth of the leather in the back of the motor car against your thighs. You can hear the jazz. Not yet, Joffrey. It's a novel that really glitters. It's poetic. It's musical, and it makes you feel heady with glamour. It's told from the point of view of Nick Carraway, a newly employed bond salesman renting a bungalow in West Egg, Long Island, in the Roaring Twenties. He soon discovered that his neighbour is an enigmatic millionaire by the name of J. Gatsby, who throws lavish parties that he mysteriously hardly ever appears at. Gatsby is shown to be godlike, omniscient, powerful, but he's also a man with secrets and desires that may, ultimately, lead to his ruin. Next up on the list, we have The Age of Innocence by Edith Wharton, published in 1920. Set in 1870s New York, it tells the story of Newland Archer, an aristocratic young lawyer engaged to the beautiful socialite May Welland. It seems as though nothing could happen to spoil the perfect happiness of the young couple, until the arrival of May's cousin Ellen, who has fled from an unhappy marriage to a Polish count. At first it seems as though the innocence referred to in the title is attributed to the shy young May. But it is Newland's increasingly apparent imagination that betrays him to be the truly naive one. He is a dreamer and a romantic, who often expresses a desire for things to be simpler, a wish that one could act without judgment from others. Despite being a man, and a man of wealth, position, and respectability, he is often shown, like other protagonists in this list, to be unsure of whether he is in control of his own happiness, or whether he is governed by tradition and social expectation.
No one can endure that.
Is he bound by convention? Or is there a freedom to be found within the set which dictates convention itself? Next up on the list we have The Enchanted April by Elizabeth von Arnim, published in 1922. It tells the story of two lonely, dissatisfied housewives, Lottie and Rose, who are lured one rainy afternoon by an advertisement for a dreamy-sounding castle in San Salvatore, Italy. Dreaming of wisteria, sunshine and escape, Lottie and Rose respond to the ad and set about finding two companions to split the costs with. Those companions are the waspish, brusque Mrs. Fisher and the bored society beauty Lady Caroline Dester. This is a novel about rigid gender distinctions. It chronicles a time where men were men, active, adventurous, self-governing, and women were helpless, bored, passive wives. Italy provides an opportunity for a renaissance of kinds. It allows these women an opportunity to feel again, to experience a richness and fullness long absent from their dreary lives in Hampstead. The Enchanted April does feel quite dated, but if you go in with an awareness that it is very much a product of its time, you should find it charming and enjoyable. Next up, we have The Well of Loneliness by Radcliffe Hall, published in 1928. This is the remarkable, powerful, beautiful story of Stephen Gordon, a girl named for the son her father, Sir Philip Gordon, so desperately wished she would be. Stephen grows up feeling instinctively different from other girls. She desires only to wear men's clothes. She wants to ride astride her horse as opposed to side saddle, as was expected at the time, and she is attracted to women. Stephen develops many talents, and had she been male, would certainly have been considered exemplary in her accomplishments. But the rigidity of gender distinctions at the time instead make her an abomination to others. Stephen has no wish to conform, to bury her true desires in order to gain social acceptance. She feels very strongly. She is full of passion and frustration and must act upon her feelings, resulting in an affair with her married American neighbour, Mrs. Angela Crosby. In fact, the word must is used often, suggesting, of course, that Stephen has no choice but to feel what she feels and to subsequently act upon those feelings. She finds a place for herself in World War I, but her skills are only temporarily welcomed and celebrated, and before long, Stephen is outcast once more. This novel was banned by the British courts for its blatant depiction of lesbian relationships. The ban was finally lifted in 1949, 6 years after Hall's death. It's an absolutely amazing novel. It's full of period charm. It's a really powerful story, unusual for the time, obviously, and I really recommend that you read it. Next up, we have Parade's End by Ford Madox Ford, published in 1924. Now, unfortunately, I don't have this one to show you because I read it on my Kindle, but it really is very good. It tells the story of Christopher Tietjens, the brilliant, straight-laced genius who might just be the last honourable man in all of England. Present company accepted, Joffrey, of course. This is empty. Joffrey? What is that? Looks like somebody needs to get in the car and go to the shops, doesn't it, Joffrey? Ooh, and get caviar! His tantalising wife Sylvia couldn't be more different from him. She is flippant and joyfully sadistic, delighting her attempts to ruin her husband with her outrageous behaviour and blatant affairs. Both Christopher and Sylvia are frustrating characters. Whilst she is wicked and devious, he is a passive-aggressive snob. What she wants from him is not always clear, but his stiffness, rigidity, and dedication to duty riles her almost to the point of madness. She wants passion, feeling, emotion that he seems almost incapable of giving. Despite falling for the refreshingly plucky Valentine Wannop, a suffragist and pacifist, Christopher refuses to act on these feelings, much to the frustration of all those involved in the love triangle.
You know what I want, I can't have.
It's an epic novel that speaks of a crumbling era, the dying out of a social class, and the destructive, long-lasting trauma of war. It documents both the huge sweeping changes in its protagonist's life, as well as those happening across the country at the time, and is truly an excellent read. Next up on the list we have The Crowded Street by Winifred Holtby, also published in 1924. I absolutely love this book. It's very moving and beautifully written. It follows Muriel as she grows up believing that her role is to appease others, her socially ambitious, overbearing mother, and men, to whom she should make herself attractive. Muriel wonders about the extent to which it's possible for a woman to be in control of her own happiness, and what the purpose of a woman's life is at that time. The Crowded Street asks the question, how much autonomy does a woman have in 20th century Britain? It's a novel that I believe will speak to a lot of people, as it talks about how we as human beings cannot help comparing our lives to those of others, and how we often feel resentful of the fact that when we're young, life seems to be full of promise and wonder, and that when we're older, sometimes the only thing that's there to greet us is disappointment. Muriel experiences all these feelings as she tries to make sense of her life and to find a way of living for herself and not for the convenience or for the pleasure of others. Next up, we have The Sun Also Rises by Ernest Hemingway, published in 1926. This was another Kindle read, so unfortunately I don't have the book to show you. It tells the story of a group of American and British expats who travel to France and then on to Pamplona in Spain to watch the bullfighting. There's a lot of drinking, flirting, and men waving their egos around. At its core, it's a novel about masculinity, which is embodied by its central character Jake, who was left impotent after an injury he sustained during the First World War. Jake is in love with Lady Brett Astley, a charismatic socialite who subverts society's expectations with her promiscuity and her unconventional attitudes towards femininity. But Jake is not alone in his love for Brett. In Spain, he vies against 3 other men for her favour and for her attention. The novel portrays the aimlessness of the so-called lost generation who lived through the war, with all characters searching for meaning, happiness, and peace, largely unsuccessfully. They drink to forget, they dance to forget, have sex to forget. At times this can feel a little exhausting to read, but there are also moments of great relief, sadness, and poignancy. That was Miss P's Top 10 Novels of the 1920s. Joffrey's back. Joffrey, come here. More. Good. Join me next week for Miss P's Top 10 Novels of the 1930s. It's going to be great. Joffrey, hit the music. Thank you so much for watching my channel. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe so you can keep up to date with all things Miss P presents. See you next time.